Girls' trip turned deadly silent when my husband saw those Instagram stories. Hello, Reddit. My name is Laura. I'm 29 years old, and up until recently, I thought I had the perfect life. I'm married to an incredible man named Jake, who has been my rock, my best friend, and honestly the love of my life for the past 6 years. We've been married for 4 of those years, and for most of it, I've felt like the luckiest woman alive. Jake isn't just a good husband, he's everything I ever wanted in a partner. He's thoughtful, supportive, and hardworking. He's the kind of man who remembers the little things, like how I can't start my day without coffee, or how I always get cold at night, so he brings an extra blanket to bed, just in case. He supported me when I wanted to quit my dead-end office job and focus on freelancing, even though it meant cutting back on some of the luxuries we used to enjoy. Jake never once made me feel like I had to prove my worth to him. He loved me for who I was, flaws and all, or at least I thought he did. But now, everything is falling apart. I'm writing this with shaking hands, tears blurring my vision because I feel like I've destroyed the one thing in my life that was truly good. Jake hasn't spoken to me in over a week. He's moved out of our house and had taken nothing but the essentials, his clothes, his laptop, and some toiletries. The house feels so empty without him, and I don't even know where he's staying. I've tried calling, texting, and even reaching out to his brother to figure out what's going on, but all I get is radio silence. It's like I don't exist to him anymore, and the pain is unbearable. The worst part? I know exactly why this is happening, and I have no one to blame but myself. You see, last weekend I went on a girls' trip with my 2 closest friends, Sophie and Clara. It was supposed to be a chance for me to unwind, let loose, and enjoy a little freedom away from the daily grind. Jake wasn't thrilled about it at first. He's always been protective of me, but I convinced him it was harmless. It's just a weekend with the girls, I told him. We'll hang by the pool, sip margaritas, and maybe hit up a spa. Nothing crazy. At least that's what I thought it would be. That's what I wanted to believe it would be. I should have known better. Sophie, who I love dearly but sometimes can't stand any dull moment, she had a tendency to push boundaries. She's the life of every party, the kind of person who doesn't believe in quiet nights or early bedtimes. And Clara? Well, Clara just goes along with whatever Sophie suggests because it's easier than arguing. I told myself I wouldn't let things get out of hand, but once we got there, Miami of all places, it didn't take long for Sophie to talk us into going out, just for one night. That's where everything started to go wrong. I didn't plan for it to happen this way. I didn't go on this trip intending to hurt Jake or betray his trust. I had no idea that one night of fun, one reckless decision, would lead to me sitting here, pouring my heart out to strangers on the internet, begging for advice. But now I can't undo what's been done. The damage is already there, and Jake knows. He knows everything. It all started with some Instagram stories. Sophie, in her usual fashion, was documenting every moment of our trip. From the cocktails we had at the hotel bar to the crowded dance floor at the club, she posted it all. I didn't think much of it at the time. Why would I? We were just having fun. But Sophie's phone didn't just capture innocent selfies or group shots of us laughing. No, her stories showed things I wish Jake had never seen, things I wish I could take back. Jake saw the stories. I know he did because when I woke up the morning after, there were a dozen missed calls from him, and a text that made my blood run cold. It said, "We need to talk." Just 4 words, but they hit me like a freight train. I knew deep down that this wasn't just about staying out late or partying too hard. Something in those stories crossed a line, and now I'm terrified that I've destroyed our marriage. When I got back home, Jake was already gone. I walked into an empty house, no note, no explanation, nothing, just the absence of him. I've been replaying everything in my mind, trying to figure out how I let things spiral out of control, but the truth is, I already know. I let myself get carried away. I didn't think about the consequences, and now I'm paying the price. I don't know if Jake will ever forgive me. I don't know if I deserve his forgiveness. All I know is that I love him more than anything in this world, and I can't stand the thought of losing him. Please, Reddit, I'm begging you, what do I do? How do I fix this? How do I get my husband to come home? When I think about my marriage to Jake, I can't help but feel like it was the kind of relationship other people envied. On the outside, we had it all: a beautiful home in the suburbs, stable jobs, and a love that felt solid, like it could weather any storm. Jake was the type of husband every woman dreams of. He was always there for me, always making me feel special. Even after 4 years of marriage, he still found little ways to show me how much he cared, whether it was leaving me sweet notes on the fridge before heading to work, or surprising me with my favorite flowers on a random Tuesday. Jake was attentive to my every need. He knew when I was stressed and would always step in to help, even if it was something as small as making dinner or running a bath for me after a long day. He wasn't just my husband. He was my partner in every sense of the word. He always put my happiness first, often at the expense of his own. I know that now more than ever, and it makes my heart ache to think about how I took it all for granted. But if I'm being honest, completely honest, there were cracks beneath the surface that I tried to ignore. Jake was so focused on our future together, and while that might sound like a good thing, it started to feel suffocating. He wanted us to plan for everything, the house renovations, the savings account for our future kids, even our retirement. Jake lived for stability, and while I appreciated his efforts, there were times I felt like I was losing myself in all the planning. It's not that I didn't love him or value what we had. I did, more than anything. But sometimes I couldn't help but feel like I was living the life he had envisioned for us, not the one I had dreamed of for myself. I never told him how trapped I felt, partly because I didn't want to hurt him, and partly because I didn't know how to explain it without sounding ungrateful. Instead, I kept those feelings buried and convinced myself that I was just overthinking. Jake was ready for the next chapter, starting a family. He would drop little hints here and there, like commenting on how cute our neighbors' kids were, or joking about turning the guest room into a nursery. And while I smiled and nodded along, the truth was, I wasn't ready. I didn't know if I'd ever be ready. I loved our life together, but the thought of adding a baby to the mix felt overwhelming. I wasn't sure how to tell him that, so I didn't. I just let him dream while I silently panicked. The idea for the girls' trip came up during one of our Friday wine nights. My best friend Sophie was scrolling through her phone, showing me pictures of some influencer's vacation in Miami. "We need this," she said, thrusting the phone in my face. "Just us girls, no husbands, no responsibilities. Come on, Laura, when's the last time you did something for you?" I laughed it off at first, but the idea started to grow on me. I couldn't remember the last time I did something spontaneous or exciting. My life has become a predictable routine: wake up, work, cook dinner, watch TV, repeat. I wasn't unhappy, but I wasn't exactly thrilled with the monotony either. Sophie's suggestion felt like a breath of fresh air, a chance to shake things up, even if just for a weekend. When I brought it up to Jake, he hesitated. "Miami?" he said, raising an eyebrow. "Isn't that more of a party scene? What exactly are you planning to do there?" "Relax," I told him, waving off his concerns. "It's just a getaway. The beach, maybe some shopping, and lots of sleep. You know how Sophie is. She just likes to make everything sound more dramatic than it really is." Jake looked unconvinced, but he didn't argue. "I trust you," he said finally. "Just be careful, okay? And maybe don't let Sophie talk you into anything crazy." "I won't," I promised, and at the time I meant it. Jake even helped me pack for the trip, folding my clothes neatly and slipping a handwritten note into my suitcase that I didn't find until I got to the hotel. It said, "Have fun, but don't forget who you're coming home to." I smiled when I read it, feeling a pang of guilt for even entertaining the idea that I needed a break from him. I told myself this trip wasn't about escaping my marriage. It was just about recharging, about finding a little piece of myself again. The first day in Miami was everything I hoped it would be. Sophie and Clara and I lounged by the pool, sipping cocktails and laughing about old memories. It felt good to let my guard down, to relax without thinking about chores or grocery lists. I felt lighter, freer, but then Sophie started talking about hitting the club. "Come on, Laura," she said, tugging at my arm. "It's just one night. What's the point of coming to Miami if you're not going to experience the nightlife?" "I don't know." I hesitated. Jake wouldn't exactly be thrilled about that. "Jake's not here," Sophie shot back, "and you're not doing anything wrong. It's just dancing. Besides, Clara and I are single, and we need a wing woman." I should have said no, I should have stayed at the hotel and stuck to the plan. But something inside me, maybe it was the part of me that felt suffocated, or maybe it was just the cocktails, made me agree. Fine, I said, rolling my eyes. One drink, one dance, and then we're out of there. Sophie grinned, already pulling out her phone to plan the night. That's my girl. Looking back, I wish I had just stayed by the pool. I wish I had ignored Sophie and followed my gut. But I didn't, and now I'm paying the price. What started as a harmless trip to escape the monotony of daily life turned into the worst mistake of my life. That night was supposed to be a quick outing, nothing more. Sophie, as usual, had been the driving force behind the plan. She wouldn't take no for an answer, and despite my reluctance, I let her talk me into going. She insisted we couldn't come all the way to Miami and not experience the nightlife. Clara went along with her, of course, she always did, and I eventually caved. Deep down, I think I was tired of being the one who always said no. I hadn't planned to dress up, but Sophie insisted I borrow one of her dresses. It was bright red, tight, and so far out of my comfort zone that I felt ridiculous the moment I put it on. But Sophie convinced me it was all in good fun. She brushed off my concerns about Jake, reminding me it was just a dress and a night out with friends. I didn't argue because, honestly, I wanted to avoid being the buzzkill. For once, I wanted to go with the flow. The club was packed, the air heavy with heat and the scent of sweat and alcohol. Music blared so loudly that I could feel the bass vibrating through my chest, and the flashing lights made it hard to focus on anything for more than a second. It wasn't my scene, but Sophie and Clara looked like they belonged there. Sophie led us straight to the bar, ordering drinks before I even had a chance to think about it. I went along with it, telling myself I'd just have one drink and keep things under control. The first shot burned my throat, and the second went down a little easier. By the time Sophie dragged us onto the dance floor, the alcohol had taken the edge off my nerves. The music was loud, the energy electric, and for a brief moment I let myself relax. It felt good to move, to laugh with Sophie and Clara, to forget about the responsibilities waiting for me back home. I told myself it was harmless. Just one night. Nothing would come of it. At some point, Sophie caught the attention of a group of men standing near the bar. She always did. They joined us on the dance floor, blending into the chaos, and I barely noticed them at first. But then one of them stepped forward and started dancing near me. He introduced himself as Evan, tall, confident, with an easy smile. I tried to stay polite, keeping things friendly without encouraging him too much. I told myself it didn't mean anything. He was just another person on the dance floor. But Evan was persistent. He moved closer, his confidence making it impossible to ignore him. I tried to keep some distance, but the alcohol and the music blurred my judgment. His attention felt flattering in a way I hadn't experienced in a long time. He complimented me, told me I looked amazing, and instead of brushing it off, I let the words linger. I let them affect me. Sophie, of course, was in her element. She pulled out her phone, filming everything, laughing, spinning, capturing every wild moment for her Instagram followers. I barely noticed at first. I was too caught up in the music, in the way Evan moved, in the brief escape from reality. But as the night went on, Sophie's phone caught more than it should have. She posted videos of me dancing with Evan, his hands on my waist, my body pressed closer to his than it should have been. When I saw her holding up her phone, I laughed it off. I told myself it was just Sophie being Sophie, sharing our night like she always did. It didn't occur to me that the story she posted would be seen by anyone who mattered. Jake wasn't even active on Instagram, and he didn't follow Sophie closely. I didn't think it was a big deal. I didn't stop to consider the consequences. As the night wore on, the lines blurred even more. Evan leaned in close, his presence overwhelming, his voice low as he spoke to me. I didn't push him away. I didn't step back. I told myself it was harmless, that it didn't mean anything, that Jake would understand if he ever found out. But deep down, I knew better. I knew I was crossing a line, and I did it anyway. By the time we left the club, I felt invincible. Sophie was buzzing with excitement, laughing about the videos she'd posted, and I joined in. I convinced myself it was all in good fun, that nothing about the night would matter once I got home. I didn't realize how wrong I was until the next morning when I saw Jake's messages on my phone. That was when the weight of it all hit me, and I knew I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. The morning after that night at the club, I woke up feeling groggy, the remnants of last night's tequila swirling in my head. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand, squinting at the screen as notifications blurred into focus. At first, it was the usual stuff, some likes and comments on Sophie's Instagram stories, but then I saw it. A string of missed calls from Jake, 12 in total. My heart dropped. There was also a text waiting for me, one that sent a chill straight through my body. It was short, just 3 words. "We need to talk." I stared at the message, my stomach churning. In an instant, the memories of the previous night came flooding back. Evan's hands on my waist, Sophie filming us, her voice laughing in the background. Panic set in as I realized Jake must have seen something. But how? Jake wasn't the type to scroll through social media often, and even if he had, Sophie's stories were just harmless fun, weren't they? I tried to convince myself that it wasn't as bad as it seemed. Maybe he'd only seen the group shots, the generic videos of us dancing, but deep down, I knew that wasn't true. Sophie never held back when it came to her posts. She loved capturing the wildest, most chaotic moments. I couldn't bring myself to reply right away. What could I even say? I figured it was better to handle it in person once I got home. Jake was probably upset, but rational enough to hear me out. At least, that's what I told myself. So, instead of texting him back, I buried my face in my hands and tried to breathe through the guilt that was suffocating me. When I finally made it home the next evening, I could tell something was wrong the second I walked through the door. The house was eerily quiet, and there was an emptiness that I couldn't quite place at first. I dropped my bag in the hallway and called out for Jake, but there was no answer. That's when I noticed it. The coat rack by the door was empty. His keys weren't in the bowl where he always left them. I rushed to the bedroom, my heart pounding. The drawers were open, half empty, and the closet doors were ajar, revealing hangers where his clothes used to be. He was gone, completely gone. On the dining table, there was a single sheet of paper. My hands shook as I picked it up and read the words scrawled across it in Jake's familiar handwriting. I saw everything. Don't bother calling. I sat down in the chair, the weight of his words crushing me. My mind raced, trying to piece together what he meant by everything. What had he seen? How much did he know? I spent the next few days in a haze, calling and texting him repeatedly. Each attempt met with silence. I tried contacting his brother, his friends, anyone who might know where he'd gone, but no one would give me answers. It was as if he'd vanished completely, leaving me alone to drown in my guilt and regret. After 4 days of silence, Jake finally agreed to meet me. He texted me the location of a small coffee shop across town, one we used to go to when we were dating. I didn't know if that was a good sign or just a cruel twist of fate, but I didn't question it. I was desperate to see him, to explain, to fix things. When I arrived, Jake was already there, sitting at a corner table with his arms crossed. His face was unreadable, but the tension in his posture spoke volumes. I sat down across from him, my voice catching in my throat as I tried to speak. He didn't say a word, just slid his phone across the table toward me. The screen was open to Sophie's Instagram stories. My stomach dropped as I watched the clips, the ones I remembered and the ones I didn't. There I was, laughing, dancing with Evan, his hands on my waist, his face inches from mine. Then came the story I hadn't seen before, the one Sophie must have deleted. It was a short clip, barely 5 seconds, but it was damning. Evan leaning in, my face tilted up toward his, our lips meeting in a brief, alcohol-fueled kiss. I tried to speak, but no words came out. My hands were trembling as I pushed the phone back to him. "Jake," I started, my voice barely above a whisper. It wasn't what it looked like. It was just a stupid mistake. It didn't mean anything. He finally looked at me then, his eyes filled with a mix of anger and heartbreak that cut me to my core. "You think that makes it better?" he asked, his tone cold and distant. "You think it doesn't matter because it was just a kiss?" I tried to explain, to tell him it was the alcohol, the atmosphere, that it wasn't who I was. But every word I said seemed to make things worse. He told me that it wasn't just about the kiss. It was about the trust I'd shattered, the way I'd made him look like a fool in front of everyone who saw those stories. He told me he'd already made up his mind. He was filing for separation. Hearing those words felt like a punch to the gut, I begged him to reconsider, to give me a chance to make things right, but he shook his head. "You can't undo this," he said. "It's done." When he stood up to leave, I reached for his hand, but he pulled away. Watching him walk out of that coffee shop, I knew I had just lost the most important person in my life. And the worst part, it was my fault, all of it. I don't think I ever truly appreciated what I had with Jake until I saw it slipping through my fingers. It's funny how you can take something so precious, so irreplaceable, and treat it like it's always going to be there no matter what you do. I thought Jake would always love me, always forgive me, no matter how far I pushed things. Now I realize how naive I was, how selfish. I thought I was invincible in his eyes, but I wasn't. And Jake eventually forgave me after thinking things through for a week. But I think the second time was his undoing, and he just couldn't cope with me anymore, to be honest. When I first sat down to write this, I wanted to paint myself in the best possible light. I wanted to explain away my actions, justify them somehow, make you all believe I wasn't the villain in this story. But the truth is, I can't do that anymore. I'm tired of lying to Jake, to myself, to everyone. I need to be honest no matter how painful it is, because I owe it to him. And maybe, just maybe, I owe it to myself too. The truth is, that wasn't my first kiss with Evan. We met some months after the whole club thing, at the local market, and we hit it off again. At first it was innocent, small talk about Miami, the usual had a great time pleasantries, but it didn't stay innocent for long. Evan had a way of making me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in years. He wasn't shy about complimenting me, telling me how beautiful I was, how captivating he found me, and I ate it up. This time I wasn't drunk or anything like that. I was looking for adventure, and after weeks of flirting online, talking about things that we weren't even supposed to talk about, dirty conversations that I couldn't even have with my husband. We would text about what color of underwear we had on, and other dirty talk like that, and we even got to the point of having phone sex. Right under my husband's nose. I always made sure he was deep asleep when I did all of these things. Eventually we decided to meet up, and I had lied to Jake that I was meeting Sophia. We kissed again, and that kiss with Evan didn't feel like a meaningless mistake, like the first one we had at the club in Miami. It felt thrilling, exciting. It felt like something I hadn't felt in years, not because Jake didn't love me, but because I had stopped letting myself feel loved. I think that's what scares me the most, knowing that deep down, I liked the attention. I craved it. And that kiss? It was just the beginning. Evan and I didn't stop after that night. I wish I could say we did, that I came to my senses and walked away before things went too far. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't bring myself to stop. I told myself it was harmless, that I wasn't crossing any real lines. The first time we slept together, I told myself it was a mistake. It happened in a cheap motel on the outskirts of town, the kind of place no one would recognize us. I remember sitting on the edge of the bed afterward, my heart racing, my stomach churning with guilt. Evan lay there like it was nothing, scrolling through his phone as if he hadn't just helped me betray the man I promised to spend my life with. I told myself I wouldn't do it again, that it was a moment of weakness, a one-time thing. But deep down I knew I was lying. It became a routine. Sneaking around felt like a game, one I couldn't stop playing no matter how guilty it made me feel. Evan knew the drill. He'd text me when Jake was at work or out with friends, and I'd make up some excuse to leave the house. I'd tell Jake I had errands to run, that I was meeting Sophie for lunch, that I needed to pick something up for work. He never questioned me. He trusted me completely, and I used that trust to cover my tracks. Evan and I became experts at being discreet. We had our go-to spots, places where no one would recognize us. Sometimes it was his apartment, sometimes a quiet park where we'd sit in his car for hours, talking, kissing, losing ourselves in the thrill of it all. He made me feel alive, like the carefree version of myself I'd been missing. But the more time I spent with him, the more I felt the weight of what I was doing. Every time I came home to Jake and saw the way he looked at me with love and trust, I felt like I was suffocating under the weight of my own lies. Evan wasn't Jake. He didn't have Jake's patience, his kindness, his unwavering support. He didn't know me the way Jake did, didn't love me the way Jake did. What Evan offered wasn't real. It was lust, excitement, a temporary escape from the life I felt trapped in. but I let myself believe it was something more because it was easier than facing the truth. Looking back, I can't believe how far I let it go. I can't believe the risks I took, the lies I told, the person I became. I told myself I could keep both lives separate, that Jake would never find out, that I could have my cake and eat it too. But I was wrong. Jake found out, and now I'm left with nothing but regret and the realization that I've destroyed the one thing in my life that truly mattered. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, and I don't expect it. But if I could go back, if I could change just one thing, it wouldn't be walking away from Evan sooner. It would be never letting him into my life in the first place. Jake found out again, and this time he wants nothing to do with me, and I'm afraid this time it's true. He found out through my phone that I had carelessly kept on the sofa unlocked, and Evan's message had popped up thanking me for the previous day's sex, and he had said he was looking forward to meeting the next day. I went into the kitchen at that time to check on the food I was cooking, and I had not even heard Jake come in because of the loud whistling of the kettle. Jake had walked in when the text popped up, and he had looked through it. By that time, I entered the living room to look for my phone and saw it with Jake, and also saw his expression. I just knew that he had found out and that I was doomed already. He was so angry, and he had asked me to leave his house, and when I didn't and continued begging him, he paid some strangers to do the moving for me. I've tried so hard to reach out to Jake, but he just wouldn't listen, and he doesn't want to hear from me at all. I love Jake, and I really don't know if I can bear the thoughts of losing him. Please, guys, what do I do? Update. It's been 2 weeks since my last post, and I wish I could say things have gotten better, but they haven't. If anything, they've only gotten worse. Jake has completely shut me out. I found out through his brother that he's been staying with him ever since he threw me out. He wouldn't even go back to the apartment, perhaps, to avoid the memories of us in the house. He won't return my calls, my texts, or even acknowledge me in any way. I've tried everything, leaving voicemails, writing heartfelt messages, even showing up at his brother's place, but Jake won't come to the door. I feel like I'm stuck in a limbo I created. Every day I wake up hoping that today will be the day he changes his mind, but the silence stretches on like an endless punishment. And honestly, I deserve it. I see that now. The weight of what I've done is suffocating, and I don't know how to live with myself knowing I've hurt the person who loved me most in this world. As if that wasn't enough, Sophie has officially cut me off. She called me the day after Jake moved out, furious about how the trip turned into a disaster for her. She told me I'd ruined the vibe and dragged her into a drama she didn't ask for. Apparently, her boyfriend saw the stories too and wasn't happy about the whole situation, even though Sophie swears she did nothing wrong. Now, she's blaming me for the fallout in her relationship, and she's been rallying Clara against me too. Our group chats are dead, and I've been left out of plans they're making. It's like I'm losing everything all at once, my husband, my friends, my entire life as I knew it. To make matters even more complicated, Evan has been texting me. At first it was just a casual, "How are you doing?" message, but it didn't stop there. He keeps saying he's worried about me and that he wants to check in. A part of me is tempted to respond, to have someone to talk to in all this loneliness, but another part of me knows that's exactly how I got into this mess in the first place. I haven't replied yet, but the texts keep coming, and they're like tiny cracks in my already fragile resolve. I feel like I'm at a crossroads, but every path looks like it's leading to a dead end. I wish I could undo everything, go back to that night and make a different choice. But life doesn't work like that, does it? I regret so badly making all of those decisions I made selfishly, and I cannot help but regret everything I've done to hurt Jake. I guess I knew the consequences of my actions, but I just wasn't thinking about them clearly. Otherwise, I wouldn't be in this mess that I am right now. I would still be in Jake's house and be happily married to me, and not here regretting and wishing I had done better. This feels horrible, and I'm so confused and angry at myself. I could have avoided all of these pains. I should have just never cheated at all, because at the end, it's all now so worthless. Update. Hi Reddit, this is going to be my last post here. It's been a month since Jake walked out, and my worst fear has come true. He's officially filed for divorce. I got the papers yesterday, and seeing his signature on them felt like a dagger to my heart. It's over. It's all over. I've spent weeks trying to convince myself there was still a chance, that if I could just talk to him, I could make him see how sorry I am. But now it's clear Jake doesn't want to save this marriage, and honestly, I can't blame him. I don't know how to describe the emptiness I feel. It's like my entire world is crumbling around me, and I'm powerless to stop it. Everything reminds me of him and what I had with him on a platter of gold. I didn't cherish him. I took him for granted, and now I'm left with a price too big to pay. I feel helpless and out of my wits. I keep hoping desperately, knowing that it could never happen, that Jake will just forgive me. But I knew just how impossible that was. Jake will never forgive me again. Not now, not ever. And then there's Evan. I caved. I wish I could say I was stronger, that I resisted, but the loneliness was too much. A week ago, I agreed to meet him for coffee just to talk. At least that's what I told myself. But one coffee turned into dinner, and dinner turned into me following him back to his place again. I can't even justify it this time. There was no alcohol, no excuse, just me, weak and desperate for something, anything, to fill the void Jake left behind. The worst part is, it didn't help. If anything, it made everything worse. Being with Evan didn't feel thrilling or exciting like it did before. It felt hollow, like I was trying to fill a gaping wound with air. I left his apartment that night feeling more ashamed than I ever thought possible. I thought I hit rock bottom when Jake moved out, but this was a new low. Now I don't know what to do. Part of me wants to reach out to Jake one last time, to pour my heart out and beg him to reconsider. But the other part of me wonders if I've already done enough damage. Maybe the kindest thing I can do for him now is let him go, give him the chance to find someone who will treat him the way he deserves, because I already ruined my chances of being that person for him. To anyone reading this, I don't have much advice to offer, only a warning. Don't let yourself fall into the trap I did. Don't take the people who love you for granted. Don't let your insecurities or boredom or selfishness lead you down a path you can't come back from. I lost the love of my life because of my own careless, reckless decisions. Don't make the same mistake. It's not worth it. Trust me. Thanks and goodbye.